Hi, soul friends. It's Anasa Saintpur, and welcome back to another short solo episode of the Minutes on Growth podcast. Today's episode is inspired by something I recently came across on social media. I saw a post that said, "Good couples never go to bed angry." And it had so much engagement. People were agreeing, reinforcing it, almost treating it like a rule for healthy relationships. And I left a comment, gently offering a different perspective. And it seems to have really resonated with a lot of people. So I thought, let's talk about this. Because what if I told you sometimes the healthiest thing you can do in your relationship is actually to go to bed angry? Yes, to go to bed angry. You might be wondering why. And that's a very reasonable question because for the longest time, we've heard the opposite. So let's start with what's happening in our brain during conflict. So, when we're calm, when we're regulated, our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for logic, for empathy, reasoning, perspective taking, that part is online. This is where you can say, I hear you. Let me understand your perspective. Let's work through this. But when we're triggered, our nervous system shifts. Our amygdala, which is our brain's threat detector, takes over. It's what we often call an amygdala hijack. And when that happens, our prefrontal cortex essentially goes offline. So now you're not responding from a grounded, thoughtful place. You're reacting from survival, fight, flight, freeze. And this is where things like saying things you don't mean, or raising your voice, or shutting down, or getting defensive starts to happen. Now, you might have heard me share similar research when I've talked about the Four Horsemen, the four communication patterns that are unhealthy in relationships based on Dr. Gottman's research. And in Gottman's research, when we're stonewalling, which is one of the Four Horsemen, physiological flooding takes place. So our heart rate increases, our body is activated, and we're no longer in a state where productive conversation is even possible. And this is the part that's really important. You cannot solve a problem when your body feels like it's under threat. So, forcing yourself to resolve it before bed in that state, it often creates more harm than good. So, as I mentioned, stonewalling is one of the four horsemen, so communication patterns, maladaptive communication patterns that can lead to disconnection and to divorce. And essentially, what it is when someone shuts down, withdraws, or disengages, often because they're overwhelmed, often because of that physiological flooding that's taking place. So, for example, have you ever found yourself talking to your partner and they're just staring back at you with a blank face? Or they're like mindlessly scrolling while you're speaking, and you're thinking, hello, am I talking to a wall? And on the other side, the listener might be thinking, there's so much I want to say, but I don't have the words, or the words just won't come out. That's what we mean by stonewalling. And it's not always intentional. It's actually a nervous system response to being flooded. So, again, going back to that physiological flooding. And if it's done without communication, it can feel like abandonment to the other partner. For example, if I'm experiencing physiological flooding and you're speaking to me and I don't communicate what's happening internally, you might feel dismissed. You might feel like I don't care. So the goal is not to force connection when flooded, but it's also not to completely disconnect without repair. The goal is a regulated pause. Pausing is not avoidance. It's protecting the relationship from unnecessary damage. So, again, going back to that same example, if you're speaking to me and I'm experiencing physiological flooding, me communicating that I need a timeout might be the best thing that I can do for the relationship in that moment because my prefrontal cortex is offline, my amygdala is online, and I cannot respond in a state where I feel like I'm under threat, or my body feels like it's under threat. But how we pause matters. It might sound like, hey, I can feel myself getting really overwhelmed right now. I really care about this conversation, or I really care about you, and I don't want to say something I don't mean. Can we take a break and come back to this in a couple of hours or even tomorrow? Notice what's happening there. I'm naming my internal state. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm reassuring my partner that I care about the conversation or I care about the relationship, and I'm committing to coming back. Oftentimes, when I work with clients, one common concern is, what if we take a time out and it never gets addressed again? So we want to have a plan in place of, can we take a break and come back in a couple of hours or tomorrow? Especially if your partner has an anxious attachment style. We want them to know that we will come back to this and we will address this. And we're reassuring them, I love you. I care about you. I care about this relationship. I care about this conversation. But I just don't have the capacity to have this conversation right now. So can we come back to it in a couple of hours? So we don't just walk away, we communicate the pause. And you might be thinking, great in theory, but that's a lot of talking for someone who's experiencing emotional flooding. And you're right. That's why I often recommend that couples choose a simple code word that represents pause for the moments that they're unable to form these sentences. Sometimes we're triggered, but the extent of that trigger, the way it manifests is differently. So sometimes I can say that whole sentence, and sometimes when words feel hard to access in that moment, we can use that code word to let our partner know that we need space without escalating the situation. Some couples I work with, they use words such as apples or bananas, very neutral words. Or they will use sports terminology if that's what they're into. But they will agree on a word. And when that word is said, both parties know that we are going to go into a timeout. Now, back to the pause. And here's a really important piece that often gets missed. If you say, let's talk about this tomorrow, you need to come back to it. And when tomorrow comes, you check in with yourself. Am I actually regulated enough to have this conversation? If yes, you initiate it. If not, you communicate again. This part is so important. So you go back to your partner and you say, I know we said we talked today, and I really want to have this conversation, but I'm noticing I'm still not fully regulated. Can we revisit this later today or tomorrow? This is how you build trust. This is how you build reliability and emotional safety, because your partner learns we don't avoid, we repair. Now, let's talk about what to actually do during that pause, because the pause isn't just time passing, it's intentional regulation. Here are a few ways you can support your nervous system. Take a walk. Take a walk outside, get some fresh air. Feel free to count the trees as you're walking by. Counting can really help. Notice the weather. Notice your breath. Intentional mindful walking. Do some slow, deep breathing. Long exhales help calm the body. So we inhale, for example, through the nose for 4 seconds, and we exhale through the mouth for 8 seconds. Prolonged exhale. Move your body, stretch it, shake it, do some light exercise, or splash some cold water onto your face or hold something cold. I love to put my face in the freezer and just breathe for a few seconds. That cold exposure can really be helpful. Listen to calming music or journal what you're feeling without filtering, or just sit in silence and allow the emotions to arise and subside to move through you. Or practice grounding. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 that you can taste. The goal is to bring your body back to safety, because once your body feels safe, your mind can think clearly again and the prefrontal cortex goes back online. So let's come back to the original statement. Good couples never go to bed angry. I would reframe that as healthy couples don't force resolution when they're dysregulated. I'll say that again. Healthy couples don't force resolution when they're dysregulated. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to say, we're both overwhelmed. Let's rest. Let's come back to this when we can actually hear one another. Because sleep itself can be very regulating, and often things feel very different in the morning. So if you've ever gone to bed feeling unresolved, that doesn't mean your relationship is unhealthy. What matters is how we pause, how we communicate that pause, and how we come back together. Love isn't about never getting angry. It's about learning how to navigate that anger in a way that protects the connection, that protects the relationship. Thank you for listening. Speak soon.